The transmission came through just past midnight over every comm channel Earth. Had left, no encryption, no warm greetings, just a single message on loop. Spoken in perfect cold standard galactic tongue. By order of the High Galactic Council, the planet designated Terra, Earth, is to surrender unconditionally within 72 standard hours. Resistance will result in total sterilization. You will comply. It repeated 4 times. Then silence. The city lights in what remained of New York flickered under the weight of it. Half the world had already gone dark. Not from fear, but from fallout, from war, from years of skirmishes against alien skirmish fleets sent to test our compliance. Some tests had been subtle, others had turned continents into ash, but here's the thing. Humanity had been born in the dirt, raised in fire, and perfected in chaos. We didn't do surrender. I stood on the rusted balcony of what used to be a Hilton hotel. The smoke and coolant filled the air. My right hand was wrapped in gauze from the last drone raid. My left held a half-charged slug rifle, and even as the council's words repeated again in my head, "You will comply," I smiled. Behind me, my team was gearing up. They were all some things. Ex-military, ex-scientists, ex-criminals. The war had burned titles off people like old paint. Now we were just what we needed to be, human. Reed, the youngest among us, was adjusting his exosuit plates, barely 20, born in the ruins of Cairo. He looked up and asked what everyone else was thinking but didn't want to say out loud. "Do we even have 72 hours? I didn't answer, not directly. Instead, I turned back to look at the cracked skyline, a graveyard of glass and metal. "We've got enough," I said. "Long enough to make them regret thinking we'd roll over." They weren't ready for us, not really. The council thought in terms of metrics, probabilities, compliance rates. That's what happens when you rule 5,000 systems. You get comfortable, predictable, soft. Humanity. We were born of rebellion. Our history books weren't about peaceful negotiations and galactic harmony. They were about betrayal, resistance, blood, and the mad, stubborn will to keep pushing even when it didn't make sense to. And now they thought we'd surrender just because they said so. Not a chance. Back in the war room, what used to be a subway station before the upper city was vaporized, we gathered the remaining resistance cells via hardline. No satellites left, no high orbit drones, just buried wires and old-fashioned stubbornness. "Council wants us gone in 3 days," I said into the rusted microphone. "Then we give them a funeral instead." Someone replied, I think it was Commander Imani from Johannesburg. Her voice still carried the rage of someone who'd watched her people turned to glass. Everyone agreed. There was no debate, no hope for some miracle fleet to arrive. Earth didn't have off-world allies. The colonies were cut off. Mars was silent. Luna had been reduced to rubble. It was just us. The Council's fleet would arrive in 69 hours. Hundreds of warships, thousands of ground troops, bred specifically to hunt and dominate non-compliant species, and we had rusted guns, scavenged mechs, and a population of battered, furious survivors who'd been underestimated too many times. Perfect odds. Later that night, as the fires from a downed drone lit up the shattered skyline, I found myself staring up at the stars. Somewhere out there, their fleet was burning toward us, confident, smug. I wondered if their commanders were sleeping peacefully if they thought Earth would be an easy prize. I almost pied them because when they landed, they wouldn't find a scared species ready to kneel. They'd find us teeth bared, backs straight, ready to bleed if it meant taking just one of them with us. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to remind the galaxy we're not the ones who surrender, we're the ones who make legends out of last stands. We're the monsters you create when you try to break a species that refuses to die, and when their High Council finally falls silent, it'll be because Earth taught them to listen. By hour 10 after the surrender demand, the world's remaining resistance forces had aligned, or at least what was left of them. I'd seen the war break everything once considered sacred. Countries didn't matter anymore. Borders were deadlines on dead maps. What mattered now was loyalty, not to flags, not to politics, but to survival, to each other. We called ourselves the Scorchmen, not because we burned everything, but because everything we loved had already been scorched. You either made peace with the ashes or you joined them. Our primary base sat beneath the bones of what had once been a financial district. In old Chicago, the skyscrapers had collapsed inward during the second wave. Orbital kinetic strikes. Now we worked and fought beneath their shadows like ghosts of an empire long forgotten. The meeting room was a former underground train terminal, dimly lit by scavenged power cells, the air wire of metal, sweat, and ozone, the scent of machines being readied for death. Across from me sat Lieutenant Ferris, once a security officer at a lunar mining rig. Lost her wife when the Artemis colonies were glassed. She hadn't spoken a word about it since the day we found her buried under a collapsed shuttle bay. But her hands steady, ruthless, focused, the kind of person you'd want beside you when the sky falls. Beside her was DeMarco, a mechanic with a kill count higher than most soldiers. He fixed drones with the same hands he used to sabotage enemy mechs. His eyes were tired, always scanning, always calculating. I slapped a digital map onto the makeshift table. Earth was divided now, not into nations but into fire zones, evacuation routes, and resistance pockets. We had 3 active battlegrounds, 5 more expected to light up as soon as the fleet arrived. They'll land in orbit first, I said. Deploy skirmisher scouts, take the cities, go for psychological suppression, then they'll drop towers. Planetary control nodes, Ferris muttered, saw them used on Kepler 22b. Turned resistance into obedient dogs. We're not dogs, DeMarco growled, and we've got something they didn't have on Kepler. What's that? Ferris asked. He smirked desperation. We spent the next 6 hours coordinating. I barked orders through rusted comms, patched into South American bunkers, African strongholds, and the last known signal from what used to be Tokyo's resistance corps. Each group had one goal: delay the landing. We couldn't beat them conventionally. Everyone knew that, but this wasn't about victory in the traditional sense. This was about showing them we weren't broken, not yet. Outside the bunker in the steel-laced yard where scavenged machinery groaned under stress, Reed was working on one of the old ironclads, a mech unit from the early days of Earth's counteroffensive. The thing was a walking relic, scarred, outdated, barely holding itself together, just like the rest of us. How's it looking? I asked, walking up beside him. Reed looked up, grease smeared across his cheek. gave it a new power core. She'll move, won't be pretty, but she'll move, that's all I ask. He hesitated, then added, do you ever think we're already dead? Like, maybe this is just us buying time before the lights go out. I crouched beside him, resting a hand on the ironclad's thigh, the metal cold even through my glove. Yeah, I said, I think about that a lot. And I don't care. He blinked. What if we're dead? Then we make damn sure they remember who killed them. We leave a mark, read, a big one, something that makes the next planet they invade hesitate, something that makes them see humans when they close their eyes at night. He smiled, slow and tired. That's one hell of a ghost story. No, I said, that's legacy. Hour 21. The first ripple in the upper atmosphere hit. We saw it before we heard it. Clouds spiraling in ways they shouldn't. Lightning firing sideways across the sky. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in an instant. Birds stopped flying. Insects went still. Nature itself froze. Then the ground trembled. Not an earthquake. Not yet, just pressure. A slow building hum that burrowed into your teeth and skull like a scream you could feel, but not here. They're here, Farah said, her voice flat. Over the next 10 minutes, the skies above Europe, Asia, and North America split open, not in light or flame, but in absence. Giant shadows fell across cities. We had no visuals, just glimpses, angles that made no sense, shapes too big to measure. One scout drone sent footage from the Arctic front, a fleet of Vasari class suppression ships, at least 20, descending in coordinated orbits. Behind them, the Dominion cradle, the central node of the High Council's planetary control system, a ship the size of Manhattan, pulsing with violet energy, surrounded by a ring of black armored escort vessels. I watched the footage in silence, not because I was afraid. I was furious. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here to make an example. And we were going to make it cost them. Hour 24, the first strikes began. They hit New Mexico, the old labs buried deep beneath the desert sands. I heard the scream of the plasma burst before the connection went dead, gone. DeMarco whispered, all of them. Farah slammed her fist against the wall. They didn't even give us 72 hours. Of course not, I said. Surrender message was theater. They were always going to burn us, so what now? I looked each of them in the eye. Now we do what humans do best. Ferris nodded. Steel in her eyes, we adapt. Hour 27. Every city still standing, lit up with resistance, explosives rigged to key choke points, EMP mines buried along predicted landing paths, cloaked exo suits using rooftops as sniper nests. Every piece of scrap tech turned into a weapon. The council troops, bioengineered, vat-grown monsters in living armor, landed in tight phalanxes. Confident in their superiority, they came to pacify. They found chaos in the ruins of Detroit. A group of teenagers lured a suppression walker into a collapsed stadium rigged with IEDs. It took out 3 enemy squads. In Berlin, an old vet used a jury-rigged rail gun to take down an orbital skimmer. The blast shattered windows across the district. The cheers were louder than the explosion. In Lagos, they tried to drop a control spire. The people swarmed it, tore it down with hammers, cables, and bare hands before the structure even activated. Earth fought, not because we thought we could win, but because we had nothing else to lose. That makes people dangerous. Hour 32. I was back in the command center. Drenched in sweat and blood, some mine. Some not. I just come from a skirmish where we took down a council command unit. The thing had 6 limbs and a face that shifted shapes. It screamed when it died. Reed was beside me holding a cracked tablet. We intercepted a message from the Dominion cradle. I raised an eyebrow. Let me hear it. He played the recording. Local resistance exceeds projections. Human aggression at 470% above. Calculated average recommendation for planetary cleansing to prevent ideological contamination. Ideological contamination, that's what they called courage. I looked at Reed. Tell the others. Them what? That they've officially pissed themselves. He grinned. We made the council afraid. Damn right. Hour 35. Our next move was clear. We couldn't stop the orbital fleet, but we could take out the cradle. One shot, one opening. One hell of a suicide run. We had a prototype, a relic from before the war really began, an old suborbital shuttle built for deep atmosphere mining, reinforced to hell, covered it. Radiation shielding, fitted now with a quantum core bomb stolen from a failed council research site. It could pierce the upper atmosphere maybe once, and if it got close enough, it could take the cradle with it. I'll fly it, I said. No, Ferris snapped. You're too important. I looked at her, really looked at her. We're all just names on the wall when this ends, Ferris. Doesn't matter if mine comes first. There was a long silence, then she nodded. We'll buy you the opening. I placed my hand on her shoulder. Make it count. As I suited up in the pilot chamber, cracked glass, rusted panels blinking, reds everywhere. I heard the resistance signal go live across every channel. 2. All surviving units. Operation Ashwick is a go. Hit them hard. By the time Earth rides one last wave outside, in every war-torn city, the world screamed as one, not in fear, in fury and defiance. We would not surrender. We would not kneel. We would show the galaxy what humans look like at the end of the world, and why that end is never easy. The shuttle's cockpit smelled like stale blood and burnt plastic. I sat strapped into a seat that had been welded back into place the night before. The controls were barely functional, half of them blinking in red, the rest flickering as if unsure whether they were alive or already dead. The onboard AI, a gutted version of something old and military grade, had refused to reboot, probably for the best. Anything programmed to calculate odds would have talked me out of this. Farah stood by the hatch, helmet tucked under her arm, her face unreadable beneath streaks of soot. We'd lost over 200 resistance fighters in the last 4 hours. She hadn't flinched once, but now saying goodbye, that shook her. You sure about this? She asked, voice flat, like if she gave it a motion it would crack. Nope, I said with a crooked smile. But I'm doing it anyway. You won't get a second run. Their orbital net will rip you apart before you even see the cradle. That's why I'm not flying straight at it. She raised a brow. Then how? Manual burn from the lower thermosphere. Low signature until I break into their blind spot on the dark side. They've rotated the cradle too close to the planet. It's arrogant. They think we're not capable of reaching them. They're not wrong, she said quietly. That's what makes it fun. Her eyes searched my face for something, a sign that maybe this wasn't real. Maybe I'd pull out, choose to stay. But I didn't blink. I couldn't if I Blinked I'd stay, and if I stayed, no one else would make it, so I leaned in. Pressed my forehead against hers. Helmets off, no formal salute, just the old human way, make the bastards bleed. I whispered. You first, she replied. Then she was gone, the hatch closing behind her with a final hiss that sounded too much like goodbye. The launch was like being punched in the spine by God. The shuttle was never meant for atmospheric re-entry, let alone exit. As we climbed into the upper stratosphere, metal groaned, heat shield screamed, and my body was shoved back into the seat so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Outside the viewports, the sky darkened from blue to navy to pitch, and then I saw it, the Dominion cradle. Even from this distance it was impossible to miss. It didn't reflect light, it consumed it, a perfect sphere of void-ringed architecture, latticed with shimmering defense nodes and guarded by an escort of stealth cruisers shaped like spinning knives. And yet they'd made one mistake. They thought they were gods, and gods don't fear mortals, but this mortal was carrying a quantum core bomb in his cargo bay, and a lifetime of anger to guide it back on Earth. Operation Ashwick was burning through the last of our defenses. Ferris led simultaneous strikes on Council landing zones, each one timed to look like desperation. In truth, they were choreographed to draw orbital fire downward, forcing the cradle's defense net to focus on planetary interference. It was working. The cradle's AI, massive and overloaded, began rerouting its sensor grid to assist in suppression efforts. That created a 3-minute window where their orbital blind spot, a small patch on the dark side of the planet, was unguarded. 3 minutes, no more. I rode the wave of gravity until I hit that exact zone, killed all external power, and coasted dead toward the cradle like space debris. If I were lucky, they'd think I was a broken satellite or a chunk of ruined orbital hardware. If I wasn't, well, then I'd still hit the cradle hard enough to make them remember my name. As the station grew larger in my viewfinder, I thought about Earth, the smell of rain on cracked pavement, the laughter of children in the underground shelters, the stubborn resilience of my species. And I smiled because, win or lose, we were never supposed to fight back at all. And yet here I was in their orbit, on their doorstep with death in my hands. 1 minute out, their scanners pinged me. I saw it on my readouts. Pulse, then a second, they'd noticed. Damn. Suddenly, a volley of defense drones launched from one of the cradle's outer rings, moving in perfect, emotionless formation, small, fast, lethal, like a swarm of silver wasps. I powered up the core. The cockpit lit with a violet glow as the quantum payload armed itself. The failsafe warning chirped. I punched it off. The drones closed in. I rerouted the shuttle's backup fuel lines, overloaded the manual thrusters, and slammed the control stick forward. The ship lurched, nose diving straight toward the cradle's core node. Pressure vent the size of a football field. If I hit that vent, even a small detonation could force internal implosion. But I wasn't planning a small detonation. The drones opened fire. The hull screamed as holes were punched through it. A warning light blinked on the right panel, decompression imminent. I didn't care. I was 20 seconds out. The cradle loomed so close now I could see its texture, not smooth metal but bone, white plating like the exoskeleton of some colossal insect. 15 seconds, a drone slammed into the Rear stabilizer, the ship spun off. Course, I fought the stick muscles. Burning teeth clenched, 10 seconds. Then I saw her, Ferris, not in front of me, not in person, but in memory. Holding the line in some broken street. Her voice in my ear, make the bastards bleed. I smiled again, 5 seconds, I corrected course, 3 seconds, the pressure vent opened before me like a gaping mouth. 1 second. I triggered the core from Earth. It looked like a second sun had been born. A pulse of white-violet light lit the night sky, streaking from horizon to horizon. The cradle vanished, not exploded, not shattered, erased like it had never been there. The shock wave tore through the orbiting fleet, scrambling their sensors, rupturing hulls. Down on the planet, Ferris stood with Reed in the middle of a burning street. Both were silent as the sky glowed with the death of a god. He did it, Reed said. Ferris didn't answer. She just stood staring up, her helmet cradled it. Her arms, lips pressed into a line of steel and sorrow. Because we all knew no one could survive that blast. In the aftermath, the Council fleet retreated, not from weakness, from fear, because for the first time in galactic history, a non-compliant species hadn't just resisted. They'd taken one of the High Council's own monuments of power and turned it into dust. They didn't know how to respond. The war didn't end that day, but it changed. The Council pulled back to reevaluate, plan, rethink, and Earth became legend, a planet of madmen, of fire and chaos, a species that laughed in the face of extinction and bit down on the throat of their conquerors before being dragged into the void. We were the story told to other civilizations. We were the nightmare whispered to obedient children. If you ever disobey the Council, you'll end up like humanity, dangerous, wild, free. I didn't die, not exactly. The core went off as planned, but the cockpit ejected milliseconds before detonation, flung into deep orbit on a trajectory no one could track. I woke up 6 weeks later, pulled from a frozen escape pod by scavenger raiders. My body was broken. My lungs barely worked. My bones were held together with steel. Now my blood mixed with synthetic restoratives, but I was alive, and the Council didn't know that. They thought the human who brought down their cradle died a martyr, and maybe in some ways he did, because I'm not the same man who launched that shuttle. I'm something else now. Something worse, something they left alive by mistake, and when I return, it won't be with a bomb, it'll be with a message, a simple one. We're still here. And we're not done fighting. I wasn't supposed to wake up. The escape pod was never meant for survival beyond 36 hours. In deep orbit, especially after being flung from a quantum core blast. But somehow 6 weeks later, I opened my eyes inside the steel belly of a ship that wasn't ours. The light was dim, fluorescence buzzed. Overhead, a foul mix of coolant and rotting meat hung in the air. Metal creaked like the vessel itself was groaning in pain. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. Every bone in my body ached. I couldn't move, but I could hear voices, guttural, sharp, clicking through translators. Not human. Is it awake? One said barely. Neural responses climbing. Must be one of the Terran commanders. A second voice rasped in mockery. The one they say destroyed the cradle. I didn't recognize the language, but I understood the tone. Contempt, fear wrapped in mockery. So the myth had spread. Good. Let them whisper. Let them believe I was dead, and then fear me when I rose again. I drifted in and out of consciousness. For hours, maybe days, the timeline blurred. When I came fully to, I was strapped to a wall, not tied, mounted. Like a specimen, IV lines fed into my arms. There was something in my spine. I could feel the weight of it, cold and foreign, a tracker maybe, or a limiter. The room was dim. One small bulb swung above me, casting jagged shadows on the rusted walls. Chains dangled from the ceiling. A workbench sat in the corner, covered in tools that didn't belong in any operating room. This wasn't a military ship. It was a scavenger vessel, probably council-affiliated black marketeers, not loyal to the hierarchy but profiting off the war. Parasitic vultures feeding on the aftermath, selling corpses, slaves, data, and now me. I didn't plan my escape, it just happened. One of the scavengers made the mistake of assuming I was too drugged to resist. They unhooked my arms but didn't remove the spinal latch. I collapsed on the floor, eyes half closed. When they knelt to pull me upright, I snapped. Bone shard in my right shoulder, one of many fragments fused during recovery, was just long enough to gouge out in. I took his plasma pistol before he even screamed. Then I painted the room with his blood. The spinal latch came out with a sickening crack and a scream I barely heard over my own rage. I limped out of that chamber like a ghost, leaving clawed handprints along the wall. As I dragged myself into the corridor, the ship was smaller than I'd expected. 6 rooms, no bridge crew, just 2 more scavengers playing a gambling sim near the helm. They died with even less dignity than their friend. By the time I found the nav system, I was shaking from exhaustion, vision swimming. I set the ship to the only coordinates I remembered from before the blast, Earth, or what was left of it. Then I passed out in the pilot's chair, fingers clenched around the pistol like it was my last piece of identity. It took 9 days to reach the outer solar system. During that time, I scavenged what I could from the ship: dried protein slabs, ancient comms, a medkit loaded with narcotics that kept me breathing, but fried parts of my memory. When Earth came into view, I almost cried. She looked worse than when I left. Orbital debris blanketed the upper atmosphere. Broken warship, defense grid station. Husks. The scars of battle glowed in dull red. Where infrastructure still burned, no active signals, no clear landing paths. Just silence. But I knew Ferris was still alive. She had to be. People like her didn't die easy. I broke through the clouds in a stolen pod, landing just outside what used to be Kansas. The earth was torn, twisted into jagged scars by kinetic strikes and atmospheric fire. Where wheat once grew, now there were craters, blackened husks of old farmhouses stood like broken teeth. Across the plains, I stumbled from the wreckage, every step a war with my body. I hadn't eaten real food in weeks. My muscles were half dead, but I moved. I kept moving because survival wasn't new to me. Pain was part of the contract of being human, and I had a mission. Find the Scorchman, find Ferris. 3 days of wandering brought me to the remains of Resistance Outpost Kilo. It had once been a communications hub during the orbital siege. Now it was a graveyard. Charred skeletons lay in rows. Beside shattered gear, the scent of death still clung to the soil, but someone had been here recently. Tracks. Supplies missing. Fires burned in. Patterns too controlled for weather, and spray painted across the side of a Crumbled tower, Ashwick lives. I followed the signs, clues. Messages left in resistance code, each one telling me where the last of us had gone. Finally, in the shadow of what used to be Denver, I found the new heart of the resistance. A tunnel complex buried so deep underground it took me half a day to reach it. Ferris met me at the final checkpoint. She didn't say a word at first, just stared, then punched me in the chest so hard I almost fell over. You absolute bastard, she whispered. I missed you too, I rasped, voice shredded. Then she hugged me. We stood there in silence for what felt like a whole war's worth of time. Back inside, I saw the truth. The resistance wasn't dead, it was evolving. Scorchmen had become something more, not just fighters but architects, engineers. They were rebuilding the underground in ways the council would never expect, growing crops using heat from geothermal vents, crafting new weapons from scavenged alien tech, training the next generation not just to fight but to win. Ferris showed me a room filled with children, not many, maybe 20, but they were learning to code, to pilot, to think like survivors. One of them, a girl with short hair and grease on her hands, looked at me and said, "Are you the guy who blew up the sky?" I blinked. "Yeah, I guess I am." She nodded once, impressed, then went back to tinkering with her power glove. "She's 7, Farah said, smirking. "Built that glove from scrap when she was 5, fried 2 walls before she figured out the capacitor charge." I shook my head. "These kids, they're the future." "No," Ferris said, "they're the end of the council." Later that night, over dim lights and salvaged whiskey, we laid out the next phase. The council may have retreated, but they hadn't given up. Rumors spoke of them building a new orbital station in the shadow of Saturn, a forward base meant to reinvade Earth once reinforcements arrived. We couldn't wait for that to happen, but we had something new: leverage. The cradle's destruction hadn't just caused fear, it had fractured their chain of command. Splinter cells within the Galactic Council's own political body were questioning leadership for the first time in centuries, and guess what? Humans were excellent at breaking empires already cracking. "What are you suggesting?" Ferris asked. "War," I said, "not on the battlefield, in their minds, in their halls. We show them Earth wasn't a fluke, it was a message." She narrowed her eyes. "You want to go up there, not just me. We take a team, find the Saturn base, infiltrate, hijack their comm systems, send a message to the entire galaxy." Ferris was quiet a long time, then she leaned back, staring at the rusted ceiling. "You really haven't changed, neither have they," I replied, "and that's their weakness." 3 days later, the Saturn mission was green lit. I stood at the edge of the new hangar bay, watching as the prototype stealth ship was prepped for launch. Reed walked up beside me. Older, taller, sharper now. He'd grown into a soldier. "You sure this isn't suicide?" he asked. "Of course it is," I said, "but so was Earth, so was the cradle, and we survived both." He chuckled. "That's either courage or insanity." I looked at him, fire in my chest. At this point, does it matter? And so we prepared for the next phase, because we weren't finished, because humanity had one final war to win, not just for Earth, but for every species waiting in silence, praying for someone to show the council could bleed. We were going to light the stars on fire and make the galaxy afraid of humans again. There are Two kinds of war, the one where bullets fly and bodies fall, and the one where silence does the killing. We were about to start the second kind. Operation Ghost Hook was green-lit under total blackout, no broadcast, no data. Trails, no paper trail. The stealth ship, a hybrid patchwork of old Earth tech and scavenged alien cloaking systems, was the only one of its kind. We named it the Needle. Fitting, since it was going to slip between the ribs of a giant and jab the bastard in the heart. Ferris was mission lead, though she tried to make me wear the bars. I refused. Command was for people with a future. I wasn't sure I had one anymore, not after everything I'd survived. I was the ghost in the machine now, the face that burned. In council nightmares, that's all I needed to be. Our objective: infiltrate the council's black site above Saturn. Code name Erebus Station. Hack into its primary comms core. Broadcast a message to every known relay. In the galactic net, truth, defiance. Humanity unfiltered. Why? Because the galaxy only saw what the council let them see. They saw propaganda, controlled feeds wiped records, council-approved language and logic. They didn't know Earth hadn't surrendered. They didn't know we burned their cradle. They didn't know we were still alive. And when they did, we needed that moment to echo loud enough to fracture the walls of their empire. The launch window was tight. We exited Earth's upper orbit in complete silence, ghosting through the orbital debris field like shadows. The Needle didn't emit heat signatures. Its hull was coated in adaptive material, a technology reverse engineered from council wreckage. It reflected background radiation, bent gravity sensors, and scrambled AI targeting. Only 5 of us made the crew. Ferris, iron-willed and quiet, wore her grief like armor. Reed now, technical prodigy and infiltration expert. Tarek, our pilot, former orbital racer turned resistance smuggler. Sila's ex-Cancel prisoner, earthborn but fluent in council command patterns. And me, the blunt instrument meant to swing. When words failed, we slept in shifts. Ate recycled protein sludge. Drank filtered condensation. We didn't speak much. There wasn't much to say. You don't talk when you're riding a bullet into the mouth of death. You just make sure the barrel's pointed the right way. Day 6, Saturn filled our view. Beautiful, colossal, the rings shimmered like glass suspended in nothingness, and there, tucked behind its shadow, hung Erebus Station, black against black, as if it didn't want to exist at all. No windows, no surface ports, just gravity locks, sensor domes, and auto defense clusters that looked like tumors spread across its skin. Erebus wasn't built for diplomacy. It was built for a racer. Council defectors called it a sanitizer. A place where information, people, even entire subspecies went when they became inconvenient. It didn't imprison. It didn't execute. It made things vanish. And now we were going to light it up. Our approach vector came in low, hiding in the radiation curtain of the outer ring. The ship's hull trembled under the static interference, but it kept us masked. Reed's fingers danced across the console as he rerouted energy signatures to mimic council maintenance drones. Tarek muttered, "This close, any glitch in we're space dust." I replied, "Then don't glitch." He didn't laugh. No one did. At 4:30 UTC, we magnet locked to the underside of a service node. The station's outer shell was cold, dead metal, emotionless, like everything the Council built, Ferris ran point, we moved in a stacked line, each of us, cloaked in compression suits that masked our body temps and heartbeat signatures. The breach point was a maintenance shaft, 6 m wide with plasma coils humming. Beneath us, Silas, Ferris whispered. He moved forward, pulling out the bypass spike, a council tool he'd smuggled out of a black site 10 years ago by hiding it in a hollowed out femur. It clicked once, twice, then hissed. The hatch opened. Erebus didn't welcome us. It absorbed us inside. It was silent. No footsteps, no chatter, no hum of life. Just the low mechanical breathing of a station that never slept, never felt, never asked questions. The halls were made of obsidian gray alloy, symbols scrolled along the walls in council. Glyphs marked sectors, AI core memory, purge unit, species archive, drone, nexus. That last one made my skin crawl. We passed chambers where stasis pods lined the walls like coffins. Bodies floated inside, not dead, not alive, just paused. Some were human, others were species I didn't recognize, all stripped of identity. Erebus didn't kill you. It scrubbed you. Silas led us to the central data spine, a column of pulsating code and quantum-linked cores that ran from the lowest level to the topmost relay. It was the heart of the station. If we got in, we could ride its comm channels out to every council system, but first we had to kill its eyes. EMP charges set, Reed said, panting. On your word. Do it, Ferris whispered. He pressed the trigger. The hall went dark. Lights died, pressure valves hissed. Defense sensors blinked out. We moved. Then the screaming started, not from us. From the walls, a sound that wasn't made by humans or speakers, more like machine agony. The AI had felt the blind. It didn't understand pain, but it recognized sabotage, and its response was rage. Ceiling panels ripped open. Defense drones fell like spiders from a broken web, black multilimbed eyes glowing red. Go, Ferris yelled. We split me and Reed to the core. Ferris, Tarek, and Silas toward the reactor to disable fail safes. I ran with everything I had. Reed at my back, hot breath echoing through the comms. We made it into the data chamber with seconds to spare. The core was massive, floating, encased in a crystal lattice, pulsing with pure thought. Thousands of consciousnesses stacked into one system, the station's memory, defenses, and personality. Every terrible thing it had ever done stored here. Reed sprinted to the control terminal, slapping down a code splitter, hijacking the protocol stream. You have 2 minutes, he gasped. After that, this whole place lights up like a funeral. I nodded and stepped towards the broadcast console. This was it. The whole damn galaxy was listening. I looked into the camera. I didn't bother wiping the blood from my face. I let them see the burns, the scar under my eye, the hate in my voice. I spoke slow, clear, no fancy words. My name doesn't matter. You don't need to know where I'm from. You just need to know what the council tried to do to my people. They burned our cities, glassed our moon, demanded we kneel. They sent a message to Earth, surrender or be erased. We smiled, then we sent their cradle into a star. They told you we were extinct. They lied. We're still here, and now we're coming for them. If you're out there, if you've been silenced, stripped, broken, you're not alone. You never were. We are the species that said no, and we say it again for every world watching. Earth does not surrender. Now it's your turn. Reed hit the transmitter, the signal. Shot through every relay in the spine. Then burst out into the black, into every colony, every system, every pocket of controlled space. We just pulled the curtain down. The AI reacted fast. It locked down every hall, sealed airlocks, triggered station self-destruct. Ferris's voice came through the comm. Fall back, reactors charging. They're going to blow the whole station. Copy. I roared. We're heading. Then the ceiling above us collapsed. A drone slammed down, metal limbs flailing, screeching. In pure synthetic rage, Reed fired 3 shots into its skull. I tackled it, drove my blade between its core plates, and twisted. It spasmed, then died, but not before slashing Reed's thigh open to the bone. He collapsed, blood spraying. I'll carry you, I said. No, he coughed. Go, shut up. I hoisted him onto my back and limped toward the fallback corridor. Emergency lights flashed red. Sirens screamed. Fire rained from ruptured plasma lines. Evac pods 2 levels down, Ferris yelled. We met at the junction, covered in soot, coughing blood. Tarek was already inside the pod, calibrating launch. Silas didn't make it. He'd stayed behind to hold the bulkhead. Bought us 2 minutes. It was enough. We threw Reed in first, then I climbed in last. Ferris stood at the hatch, staring back at Erebus. It's going to blow, I said. I know. You okay? She looked at me. No, but I'm alive. That was enough. We hit the ignition. The pod shot from the belly of Erebus just as the station's core went supercritical. Behind us, a new sun was born. Erebus, the eraser of species, the black heart of silence, was gone, and with it, the lie. We didn't go back to Earth right away. We vanished into the void, let the message ripple. Within a week, 3 border systems revolted. By month's end, Council High Command was under internal investigation. And humanity, we weren't ghosts anymore. We were symbols, proof that defiance works, that fire can fight the cold, that sometimes one spark can burn a kingdom down. But this isn't the end. The Council isn't dead, just wounded, cornered, and we know what wounded animals do. They lash out, they hunt. But now we're hunting back. The galaxy didn't burn overnight, but it started to smoke. Within 24 hours of our Erebus broadcast, the ripples hit hard, not just politically, psychologically. Civilizations across hundreds of systems that had been taught to fear the Council suddenly saw the cracks. For the first time in generations, the galaxy felt mortal. You could hear it in the comms traffic, confusion in Council transmissions, stammered orders, requests for clarification that went unanswered, and in the outer systems, the ones the Council had protected with an iron fist, riots sparked, mass power failures, protests, hacked banners lit across domed cities that read in every tongue, Earth lives. For us, that wasn't victory, it was bait, because we knew what came next. Empires don't die quietly, they thrash, they kill, they remind the galaxy why their name once meant fear. We were about to become a symbol, and the Council, they were about to become a storm. Back on Earth, the mood wasn't celebration, it was silence. The resistance had grown. Yes, Ashwake had lit 1,000 small fires, but victory hadn't changed who we were. If anything, it had made our enemies more desperate, more dangerous. I stood on the edge of what used to be Colorado Springs, now little more than craters and buried bunkers. Snow drifted over the burned-out bones of buildings. It looked peaceful, but it wasn't. Beneath the surface, men and women. Rebuilt launch tubes, weapons caches, and defense grids kids trained with. Repurposed drones, old soldiers taught. Guerrilla tactics by scratching plans into metal walls with knives. Ferris approached from behind, wrapped in a ragged cloak, her breath misted in the cold. They've seen the message. She said, I know you look disappointed. I glanced at her jaw clenched. I'm not, I just know what happens next. She nodded. We hurt their pride, now they'll come with teeth. I hope they do, I muttered, because we've sharpened ours. We had 96 hours before the first retaliation strike. Reed predicted it. Not just when, but how. They won't send a fleet, he said. Hunched over a terminal, they'll send a signal, something brutal, tactical, meant to remind the galaxy they're still the gods in the sky. What kind of signal? He brought up satellite data, or what was left of it, and mapped Council fleet formations near Proxima B. They'll wipe out a colony, he said. One that's only partially aligned with them, just to show the galaxy they're still capable of genocide. Blame it on terrorists, on us, turn our broadcast into propaganda. I looked at the name of the colony. Sargon 4, a civilian planet, mixed species, unarmed. My hands clenched so hard my knuckles went white. They want a message, I growled. Let's give them one of our own. Operation Black Fangs was born in blood. We couldn't protect Sargon 4, not directly, but we could intercept. We had intel on the fleet, 5 Council destroyers, 1 command carrier, fast deployment, no ground forces, just burn and vaporize maneuver, a war crime disguised as retribution. Reed found a weakness in their supply lanes, a fuel relay in the asteroid belt near HD 437. Hit it right and they'd lose warp velocity before reaching the colony, and then we'd hit them while they were stranded like wolves at the throat of a broken beast. We took 2 ships, the Needle, now refitted with an internal stealth rail system, and a new warbow we named Clawhook, angular, armored, and angry. We didn't bring an army. We brought 8 people, enough. When we dropped into the belt, silence greeted us. The Council tankers floated like black coffins between drifting rocks, tethered by gravity cables and automated drones. Tarek ran silent through the debris field, adjusting course every 4 seconds. The moment we passed the closest asteroid, Ferris activated the jammers. Reed unleashed 2 disruption torpedoes. 1 slammed into the main tanker, the second hit the fleet's relay node. Instant blackout. The ships lost comm, sensors, and course correction within seconds. From our view, they drifted like a lost funeral procession. We didn't waste time. We boarded the flagship. Inside, the Council crew was in chaos. Their armor clanked on metal floors as they scrambled. They weren't used to being boarded. They were used to suppressing, dominating, erasing. But this wasn't a simulation. It was war. I led the charge through the engineering wing, shot 1 in the face, slit another's throat before he even turned. Ferris was beside me, plasma knife humming. Reed kept watch from the ventilation grid, sniping targets through the walls. We fought like monsters because that's what they'd always called us. When we reached the command bridge, the captain, some 4-eyed priest-class alien with gold-threaded robes and skin like ink, raised his hands. He tried to speak in Council tongue, formal and hollow. I didn't let him finish. I shot him in the mouth. No more sermons, I growled. We hijacked the ship's internal comms and broadcast to the other 4 ships in their native dialect. You're trespassing in sovereign space. Earth has no tolerance for genocide. Turn back or die here in the dark. They didn't respond. Instead, one of the destroyers turned its turrets and fired on the command carrier, their own ship, trying to prevent us from using it. They knew what we were. They knew what we'd do with it, but they were too late. We dumped the ship's memory core to quantum burst relay, sent every byte of evidence straight to outer system relays, proof of their plan to sterilize Sargon 4, proof of council war crimes, and then we blew the fleet. Every one of them, no survivors, no hesitation. Back on Earth, the broadcast hit. The galaxy reeled, council aligned. Races tried to suppress it, but the message was already viral. Millions of systems downloaded it, streamed it, shared it. Resistance factions across 50 worlds suddenly had proof that humanity wasn't just defying the council, we were exposing it, and not just us. Species that had lived for centuries in fear started rising quietly, then loudly, then with fire, but retaliation still came. Earth's skies opened again. Kinetic bombardments, atmosphere ignitions, orbital sweepers. They weren't trying to win, they were trying to erase, but this time we were ready. We had rail guns buried under ice, cloaked fighters that ran silent between craters. We had spies feeding us fleet paths, and engineers who turned trash into torpedoes. We fought back, we made it cost, we bled them, but we bled too. Ferris lost an eye and part of her leg during a breach in the New Sydney tunnels. Tarek didn't come back from a run in the southern hemisphere. Reed nearly burned alive hacking a war drone. I carried his body out myself, half his face gone, breathing through shredded lungs. He looked at me through one good eye and said, "Did we win?" I told him the truth. No, not yet, but we had done something worse to the council than just win a battle. We'd changed the story. No longer were we the primitives, we were the precedent, the species that refused, resisted, and retaliated. A symbol of what happens when a conquered world bites back so hard it takes the hand with it. We weren't survivors anymore, we were a movement. And somewhere deep in council space, where the ruling class cowered behind walls of synthetic ivory and programmed loyalty, they watched our broadcasts in silence. They saw our scars, our fire, our rage, and they remembered the cradle, because we would never let them forget. It started with whispers, small colonies on the fringe, places no one remembered, except the tax collectors began refusing council decrees, refusing shipments, blocking patrol ships. One station even jammed a diplomatic envoy and dumped them into space. Council called it minor unrest. By the time the 4th species declared open rebellion, it was civil war. And Earth, we weren't watching, we were stoking it. The turning point came at Delverin, a trade moon orbiting a neutral system. For 2 centuries it had been a melting pot. Humans, Trajan's Curie, even offshoot council officers who'd gone native. It was a hub for bribes, backdoor deals, and synthetic pleasure districts. And when Earth's signal reached them, when our broadcast of the Erebus station, the cradle, and the burned fleet went public, everything changed. Delverin didn't just rebel, it hunted the council. 24 council loyalists were dragged into the streets, beheaded, their blood mixed with cybernetic oil in the gutters. Broadcasts of their screams played on every screen for a full day. Ferris watched the footage beside me. Our command center deep beneath Earth's crust. That's not justice, she muttered. No, I replied, but it's what we caused. She turned to me, eyes cold. And what does that make us? I didn't blink. It makes us effective. I didn't build this war to be clean. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were virus and fire. We weren't liberating planets. We were showing them how to burn their cages, one ember at a time. I had a list now, not of targets, but of leaders, not mine. Theirs. Council High Command was made up of 6 species. The oldest, the Eloriles, hadn't left their palace cradle in over 600 years. All they did was issue edicts, stroke their gilded robes, and pretend the galaxy still obeyed out of respect. They were next. But I couldn't reach them with bombs, so I used something better. I used their own people. The defector's name was Solon, a council archivist, female Curie. Skin like layered glass and a voice that never rose above a whisper. She found us, slipped through their blockade in a stolen diplomat vessel, and landed in the Badlands west of Old Mexico. Her ship was smoking. Her body was half burned from re-entry. She dragged herself to the resistance line on bloody knees and collapsed with 2 words on her lips. I've seen it. We didn't believe her at first. Another spy. Maybe another setup. But when Reed scanned her cortex for memory layers and decrypted her neural logs, we saw the truth. The council was planning final protocol, a complete planetary sterilization event. Not just on Earth, but any world that had received our message. They didn't want to win. They wanted to delete the idea of resistance. They're scared, Ferris whispered, staring at the projection. They're afraid of us. Good, I said. No, she snapped, turning on me. This isn't a win. This is the beginning of the end. If they push the button, we lose everything. So what? I snapped. We surrender, beg for terms. She shook her head. No, we take the button from them. Operation Godsbane wasn't a battle. It was surgery. We weren't going after council ships or stations or soldiers. We were going for their source code, their logic matrix hidden beneath their throne world, buried under 10 km of metal quantum firewalls and a guardians. It was called the Ecliptic Vault. Solon had access codes, partial ones, enough to get us past the first tier. After that, we'd be ghosts inside a machine that never forgets. Ferris built the team herself. Reed still recovering, now with a full neural rig hardwired into his spine. Tarek's younger brother, Car's an infiltration specialist who could mimic council command signatures. Solon, our guide and bargaining chip. And me, I wasn't just there to fight. I was there to be seen, the human who burned the cradle, the ghost of Earth. Getting in took 12 weeks. We piggybacked on a peace delegation, Curie envoys, claiming they wanted to negotiate surrender terms on Earth's behalf. We were smuggled inside their honor guard. The irony was almost comical. They used to search humans on sight. Now we were under their noses. Solon walked ahead of us like a priestess, her back ramrod straight, wearing ceremonial robes with a neural key woven through the hem. Every checkpoint was a nightmare. Every scan threatened to expose us. Every minute inside the vault was a heartbeat closer to hell. The core chamber looked like nothing human, a cathedral of code, lines of living energy etched into walls of thought metal. The vault wasn't a computer, it was a mind, one built over 1,000 years. fed by species wars. Obedience. This was how the council ruled, not with force but with belief, and that belief lived here. Reed accessed the primary node. His hands trembled as he touched the interface. They think they're gods, he whispered. They actually think they were chosen, designed to rule. They weren't, I said. No, he agreed. They were just the first to lie loud. Enough, he found the command keys. There were 7, each one connected to a sterilization node across the galaxy, each one poised to burn an entire world. We can disable them, he said, permanently, but it'll expose us. They'll know we were here. Ferris asked. He nodded. And they'll never stop hunting us. They already don't, I said. Do it. Reed's fingers danced. Code unraveled. Safeguards failed. The sterilization command went dead. Galaxies blinked free of extinction. It was done. We expected alarms, drones, defense systems. Instead, we heard a voice. So the ghosts are real. It came from everywhere and nowhere. The vault's central AI, the architect, an old voice, older than war, older than species. We've been waiting, it said. Ferris raised her rifle. Yes, you burned our cradle, you shattered our vault. And now you've come to kill gods. I didn't come to kill gods, I said. I came to prove there aren't any. The voice paused, then laughed. Not synthetic, not cold, human. That's when I realized the AI, it wasn't just council made. It had been built using a human base code. We'd made the system centuries ago, lost in the first explorations, buried, found by the council, warped, grafted, and now it remembered us. You are beautiful, it said. Terrible, uncontrolled. You were never meant to survive, and yet here you are. Ferris stepped forward. If you were human once, you can help us. No, the architect replied. I cannot help. I can only watch. Then watch this. Reed growled and uploaded a virus, a neural plague, designed by Ferris and Solon. It didn't delete the vault, it mirrored it. Send copies of everything to systems across the galaxy, every secret, every lie, every order of sterilization, every false flag, every council betrayal. The galaxy blinked, and then it woke up. We barely escaped the vault. Council guards stormed the levels as we fled. Ferris killed 3 before we reached the evac lift. Cars lost an arm but refused to slow down. By the time we hit orbit, fleets were rising, but not just theirs. The Free Curie Armada had declared independence. Traskian civil fleets had turned their weapons on loyalist outposts, and in the shadows between systems, new flags flew. Not of Earth, but of resistance, of unity, of vengeance. Back on Earth, I stood under a shattered sky, watching auroras bloom from leftover EMPs. We weren't just fighting anymore. We were leading, not just as soldiers, but as something more, an idea, the first species to say no and mean it. There's a moment after every war where silence doesn't mean peace, it means breath, the kind of breath you take after dragging yourself out of a wreck. A lungful of smoke and blood just to remind yourself you're not dead. That's where the galaxy stood. The council hadn't fallen, not completely, but it was bleeding, coughing, burning from 1,000 cuts. Their propaganda had collapsed. Their sterilization protocols were dead. Their loyalist fleets were turning against them one by one. And Earth, we weren't just a rebellion anymore. We were the blueprint, they say. The final shot that broke the council. didn't come from a weapon. It came from a story, a broadcast launched across the last uncorrupted node in the Galactic net. The message wasn't crafted in a lab, it wasn't approved by diplomats. It was a raw, shaky video captured by a dying Kali soldier on a backwater moon. Called Dikareth, she was pinned under rubble, breathing shallow, blood pooling under her cracked armor. In her final moments, she said one thing: we thought the humans were monsters, but they didn't kill us. They fought beside us. They died with us. They taught us how to fight back. If this is what monsters look like, I'll die one of them. That video went viral. In less than 5 hours, the next day, 3 core systems declared war on the Council, not to take power but to end it. Earth didn't lead the charge. We didn't need to. The fire we started now burned in places we'd never even heard of, in cities orbiting binary stars, in oceanic metropoles built beneath alien seas, in fungal colonies that once fed Council soldiers with bioengineered meat. The galaxy rose, but someone still had to finish it. Someone had to cut the head off the beast. That job still ours. The Council throne world was a place few had seen. Its name was unpronounceable, its surface hidden behind radiation storms and defensive grids so thick they collapsed local gravity. The Elorials, the oldest of the Council, had ruled from its spires for millennia. They had never been touched, never threatened, never even challenged. Until now, Operation Gravestone wasn't just an assault, it was an execution. Coalition of over 40 species participated. Former enemies, former subjects, all fighting under one flag. Not of Earth, but of the burned Council. Seal inverted in black and red. They gave me the honor of leading the assault, not because I was the smartest, not because I was the strongest, because I was the face, the ghost, the human who refused. We landed during the eclipse cycle, a rare window where the planet's triple moons blocked external scanners. Our ships punched through their outer ring like daggers. Fleet-to-fleet combat raged the upper orbit while drop pods speared through the atmosphere. I rode down with Ferris and Reed, both scarred, both ready. No speeches, no war cries. We went there for glory. We were there to bury. The throne city wasn't gold or crystal like stories claimed. It was bone white, endless towers sharpened like teeth piercing the clouds, temples of obedience, altars of silence, empty. No citizens, just guards. Machines, protocol drones. We cut through them street by street, room by room. They didn't beg, they didn't run. They fought like they'd already been condemned because they had. The inner sanctum was a cathedral of light, a spiral dome where the last of the Elorials sat in their thrones, 7 of them draped in veils, neural implants pulsing with dying signals. I stepped forward alone. Ferris tried to stop me. I shook my head. This was mine. The High Elder, a creature taller than any man, with hands like tree branches and skin made of folded flesh, looked at me without blinking. You have no idea what you've unleashed, he rasped. Yes, I said. Freedom. You call this chaos? Freedom? We gave order to the stars. You gave fear, you gave death, and you called it peace. He tilted his head. And what have you given them? I stepped closer. Hope. Then I pulled the trigger. No ceremony, no final monologue, just a bullet, a human bullet, through a god's head. The last of the Council died in silence, not with explosions, but with a whisper, and that was all we needed. It took months for The galaxy to breathe again, governments formed, trade resumed, species that had once spoken only in code now spoke freely. There were mistakes, of course. Power vacuums, scars that wouldn't heal, old hatreds that didn't burn away with the council. But for the first time in centuries, no one told us how to kneel back on Earth. We didn't rebuild cities the same way. We didn't need glass towers or gilded monuments. We built memorials to they fallen, to the fighters, to they nameless, to the monsters who became men. Ferris disappeared 6 months after the war ended, said she needed quiet, said she'd seen enough fire for one lifetime. I let her go. Reed became an architect, not of buildings but of systems. He helped rewrite trade law, created galactic net protections to make sure another vault could never rise again. Me, I stayed where it all began, in the ruins of old Chicago, beneath a broken sky. I taught, not in classrooms, in streets, in tunnels, in hidden places, where survivors asked, "What now?" And I told them, "Now we live." One night a child asked me, "Was it worth it?" I didn't answer right away. I looked up at the stars, the same stars that once held our enemies. Now they held our allies, our future, our dead. I looked at that child and said, "We were supposed to die. We were supposed to vanish, but we didn't." We smiled and we fought, and we bled so no one else would have to. So yeah, it was worth it. The galaxy will write books about us. Some will call us terrorists, some will call us heroes, but the truth is simpler. We were human, and that was enough. We weren't the strongest, we weren't the smartest, we were just the ones who said no. And that single word, that refusal, it brought an empire to its knees.